Selling tenanted properties can be challenging at the best of times, in the best of markets. Maybe just wanting to shed some light on what the current investor landscape looks like, what it looks like right now if you are a landlord and you are potentially considering a sale in the next year or so. Or I know a couple people that have had tenants move out recently and are considering, should I rent again or should I sell? And so just wanted to maybe shed some light on what selling a tenant property is looking like right now versus time of year versus potentially waiting till next year. And if you do have a tenant in your rental property right now and are wanting or thinking about a sale next year, maybe to start those conversations early. But where
let's call this episode, Carl, the landlord dilemma. Because it is a dilemma, you know. And why is it a dilemma right now? When the market's flat or downward trending, it's not exciting to be a landlord.
I mean, what percentage of landlords over the last 3 years have been cash flow negative? Let's start there. High percentage, right?
I mean, you're only not cash flow negative if you bought your property ages ago, right? Exactly. Like anyone you could never buy cash flowing properties in this city, like in the last decade, you know, that makes sense instantly. Yeah. Unless it's like a real house hacked up into multiple units. No, it's a low return. I mean, there's no incentive right now. If you're talking about incentives to invest, where is the incentive to be a landlord today? There was an incentive in the 90s when you see in the 2000s, in early 2010s, when you see prices go up 10% a year, or when you see significant gains, having a tenant live in your property at a rent that covers your bills and while your property is going up is great. Having a tenant live in your property at rent that doesn't cover your bills while your investment's not doing well is not. And the political environment around Tenancy Act and tenancy protection has gone against the landlord, which, what does that do? It reduces the incentive. It reduces the supply. Doesn't make you want to be a landlord.
That's exactly it. Is a lot of landlords were willing to put up with negative cash flow because there was the upside potential that, okay, well, if I hold this for 5 years, 7 years, that capital appreciation is going to look good enough that I'm willing to, be negative $500 a month or whatever that may be. But when we're looking at 3 straight years of downward pressure on sales prices and your capital appreciation going negative, a lot more people are unwilling to sacrifice that negative $500 a month, or in some cases with interest rates much higher a couple of years ago, a lot more negative cash flow than that even.
100%.
And then you have, just this year, the increase in notice period from 2 full months to 3 full months. And what that does when you're a landlord selling a property is it eliminates a big percentage of the buyer pool because they don't want to wait 3.5, 4 months to complete and move into a place, especially those smaller condos that are often first-time buyers that want to move in 4 or 6 weeks.
We've sold a few rented tenanted properties, or we have a few listed, and we've sold a few in the past. When you kind of reflect back at our tenanted property sales over the last year or two, how many buyers assumed the tenancy? And how many buyers wanted vacant possession? If you were to just reflect on a few.
I can't think of one that took over a tenancy off the top of my head right now in the last 2 years. Can you?
I can't think of one that took over the tenancy in the last 2 years either. Even with the more land value type of rentals that we had, where it's the lowest consequence of having a tenant there, but while you're planning for your build, even in those cases that we sold land value properties, buyers wanted them vacant.
Yeah.
They did not want to deal with a tenant. I think the burden and the uncertainty is just hard to put a number on it, but I could see it, for detached in Burnaby or Vancouver, I could see it being a 6-figure number in some cases. But reality is, investors aren't a big portion of the buyers right now. And even the ones that are investment minded often want a vacant possession. And investment minded being someone that's looking to add, I can't even think of a buyer potentially looking to buy a rental property that is already rented and plans on keeping it as a rental. Like that just doesn't exist right now. I could see a buyer buying a house that they plan on developing one day that has a tenant in it. And even in that case, they often want them vacant. And why we're bringing this up is when you have a tenanted property and you're trying to sell a tenanted property, in our case, in our little business, in our world, we're anticipating the buyer that's going to offer on that property wanting vacant possession. So if you're on a month-to-month tenancy and you get an offer today, well, today we're time stamping this is October.
So this is a really good example because it's October 29th.
Yeah.
And the way that you have to give notice as a landlord is 3 business days prior to the end of the month. So your notice period is actually for November. So November doesn't count. So it's December, January, February. So if you were to sell your property today, you're not legally allowed to give vacant possession until March 1st.
Yeah. So you need a buyer that wants to buy today and close March 1st. I don't even know how many sales like that are happening when I look at the rental units on Carnarvon Street in New West, all the rental condos in Brentwood. There's so much option for condos out there right now. Buyer's just going to pivot to one that's not a rental, or not a month-to-month rental, or not under. There's enough vacant options that will come to fruition.
And to put that into context, I had a buyer buy a 1-bedroom condo in New West last week, and we asked for a middle of January completion, and the seller thought, "Oh, that's long."
Yeah.
And so now, if you're selling a rented property right now, you're asking for a March completion. That's going to be tricky to find a buyer to do that right now.
Yeah. So a big part of the reason we're bringing this up is it's hard enough to sell a property in this market. It's extra hard to sell it with a tenant in place. And if you're lucky to sell a property with a tenant in place, expect the buyer to want vacant possession, expect a longer close. And when you consider all these factors in mind, sometimes it's, right now, at the time that we're having this episode and doing this video, it would probably make sense for you to have a conversation with your tenant today and plan for next year and try to work on an agreement for them to move out if you want to sell. So if you're an owner of a property and you want to get serious about selling it in 2026, let me tell you, the ones that weren't serious about selling it in 2025 are still sitting on their properties. And those are the ones that will probably still be sitting in their properties next year too. But my advice that I've kind of put out there to a few people, and I can't think of a situation where I would say keep your tenant there. It's going to help the saleability of your place. But my advice is if you're sitting on an extra property or an investment property that you don't want anymore and you'd like to sell it next year for the best possible outcome, if you have a conversation with your tenant today, and this is assuming you're on a month-to-month tenancy, even if you're on a fixed-term tenancy, those roll into month-to-month anyway. So have the conversation with them earlier. The benefits of having that conversation early is you increase the chances of working out a deal with the tenant. You might get your tenant might find another place knowing that they're eventually going to have to move out and might make this process easier for you. But if you have the conversation early, you're forewarning your tenant with lots of notice. The future process will be better. That tenant might find another place in the interim, knowing that they're going to have to move anyway. And if the tenant has no intent on moving and they want to stay, you're going to find that out real quick. And then the conversation is going to be pivoting to, can I work out a deal with you? If you stay in the property and we keep you there, just recognize the buyers aren't going to want to keep you there. There's no investors buying right now. The buyer for this place or any place is typically an end user. They're going to want vacant possession. In the time that we're listed, you're going to have to accommodate getting photos and marketing materials. And then there's going to be open houses and showings. And then there's going to be an inspection. So there is going to be some intrusion and access for a month or two, or depending on how long it takes, maybe even more. And then ultimately, the buyer's likely going to want vacant possession, and they're going to evict you because they're probably going to move in, and they're going to give you 1 month free rent. And I think we're both better off if we have a predictable move-out date. And if we're having that conversation October 29th or 30th, and thought is, hey, what do you feel about moving out by May 1st or June 1st? Maybe you say, look, a buyer is going to give you 1 month free rent. You're going to have to show, you're going to have to do all these things next March or April for me to sell this place. Or how about I get you to sign a mutual agreement to end tenancy today? I give you 2 months free rent instead of 1, just so that you have you're getting an extra bonus month off. And I'm giving you that extra bonus because I just want a predictable date to plan around. You have a move out date that you can plan around. If you find a place early and move out early, I'll still give you the 2 months off and we'll agree to that. We'll get you out early, no problem. And if you don't, here's your deadline. No 2 free months rent. You move out. I clean up the place. I paint the place. I present it better. I get a better sale price. I have a more sellable place. And the tenants get 2 free months rent instead of 1 free month rent. And they don't have to accommodate all the showings. So there's a lot of different versions of that conversation, but all in all, that's a conversation I'm suggesting people have today that want to plan for next spring.
The reason for this question is I've had a few people reach out in the last 2 weeks that are in this scenario, have tenanted properties and want to sell in the next few months. Is there a scenario that you would list that property right now while tenanted?
I have a listing right now. Tenanted. I saw, yes, there's a scenario, Denny. If it's an East Van or if it's in North Burnaby, if it's in a hot area, in most cases, it's not worthwhile. In most product types, are not strong enough to have a tenant in it and sell. You have to have something pretty unique and rare and desirable. So what are the pros to having a tenant in the place? Well, let's put it this way. Is there a condo that's easier to sell with a tenant in it? No, I can't think of a condo that's easier to sell with a tenant in it.
The only thing I can think of from a landlord perspective is the market is unpredictable. I don't know if it's going to be vacant for 1 month and sell right away, or if it's going to be vacant for 6 months and to sell. And the advantage of having a tenant is a portion of your monthly expenses are being paid for by the tenant's rent.
I think an argument to list today, if it was more of a generic condo, is you're going to list today if you need the money ASAP, and you're willing to list at a very desirable price that's slightly below market.
Mm-hmm.
If other 2 bedrooms are selling at $650, you're going to list at $599. I think the only chance, if you have a price that seems too good to be true, but not like just slightly too good to be true, that's your best chance of success.
Mm.
Other than that, land value, good lots, good locations, you can you're still taking a hit on price. But I think the only reason that comes to mind to list today is because you need the money sooner. If someone was expecting to get paid the same time, if you're expecting to get paid, in a successful event, get paid next May or June, then I wouldn't list today. I would say, talk to your tenant, see if you can. I would gamble on next year. Is basically what I'm suggesting, or what I would do if it were my situation. And I'm gambling on next year because 2 things. 1, there's rate cuts happening now, and I think spring's better than fall. And then 2, vacant, clean places sell better than tenanted places. And I think all in all, I'll get to a better outcome if I just do the process that leads to a more sellable place at this point in time than if I don't.
Yeah.
There's definitely instances where that's not true. And I think the only thing that really stands out is, why would you list a tenanted place today? It's because you're willing to take a hit that's a good deal in the market, and you need the money quick. And good luck. Am I missing something? No.
I think that's the only thing. I think from a landlord perspective, a lot of people are nervous to have that conversation with the tenant, because especially this time of year, because if they move out and they find something for December 1st or January 1st, then I'm listing without someone in place in a market that may be very similar to today. And what if it doesn't sell for 60 days or 90 days? Now I'm eating the mortgage and strata fee for an extended period of time.
I think if you're, quite frankly, I think you can look at eating those payments as still being better than the alternative outcome of, if the game is, we'll wait till times are better, you're just wait, but if the game is, I need to get this place sold in the next 6 to 12 months, I don't know, if in the last 12 months, this calendar year of 2025, if you listed a place in February that was tenanted, you might still be active listing today. You may not have sold at all because of how much competition's out there. Mm-hmm. I think that rents will probably stay. Do you see rents climbing anytime soon? Do you see anything that, let's assume rents stay. Let's assume the tenancy laws stay. Mortgage rates might get a little bit better. I don't think investors are going to come back in herds next year. Maybe a few show up. I would look forward to that day where a buyer is willing to take over a tenancy, because that will be a sign of a real strong market. But But I don't see that day anytime soon.
Yeah.
What would need to happen for you to think, where do you think, whether it's rates, whether it's tenancy laws, or you name it, what needs to happen to encourage people to be landlords again and buy investment properties again?
If you look at the last 12 months, rents have probably come down 5 to 10% in different areas. So I think those numbers would have to be on the incline again instead of decline. I think a lot of people are shying away from investing in real estate. One of the reasons being just rental prices monthly are on the decline. And then the other thing is there has to be some optimism about future capital gain again. Right now, the last few years, people have kind of accepted that market values are either flat or going down and have gone down in a bunch of different locations. And there's not a clear forecast of that looking better in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. I think sitting on a vacant place is a genuine concern for people that are, strapped financially and pretty tight. And if that's your concern and you had the conversation in early October, November, and you're worried about the tenant moving out in 2 weeks after that conversation, yeah, maybe shelf that conversation till next February.
Yeah.
If you're worried about cash flow monthly and a tenant moving out immediately because of the news, shelf it to next year. But if that's an unlikely scenario, having that conversation positions you better to get to a vacant place next spring. And in my suggestion of offering 2 free months rent, keep in mind, when investor buyers are buying rental purpose buildings, or when they have rental purpose-built rentals or rental-only buildings that they can't use that I'm moving in to evict you or renovation eviction notice anymore, there's people that are offering their tenants like $5,000, $10,000 to get out because their rents are so below market. And that might be equivalent to a year rent for them because their rents are so below market. And if they re-rent it at market rents, their cap rate goes up and their building just appreciates in value.
Yeah.
So to eat a month rent or 2 or 3 to get a predictable move out date next year in what should be hopefully a better market than what we're seeing today, or even if it's the same market that we're seeing today, it's going to make your place way more sellable, and you're probably going to get further ahead. I just don't see many buyers taking over a tenancy. And if you wrongfully evict a tenant, that can be troublesome too. Tenants are more aware of their powers than ever before. And if you wrongfully evict a tenant to make your place more sellable and you list your place for sale, you could be on the hook. That tenant might go rent something else and you could be on the hook for a year of their rent. And if you're okay with that, then sure, wrongfully evict them. But know that cost of wrongful eviction is probably a lot more than what you'd work out with a deal with that tenant. Yeah.
Isn't it wild, the drastic sentiment change in this podcast talking about investment properties versus like 4 or 5 years ago?
The properties we need to feel that real estate's going up in value to justify the risks of being a landlord.
Yeah.
You have another person occupying your home, you're maintaining another property, you're not cash flowing in a lot of cases, and you're taking on a lot of risk. If the property values are flat or downward trending like they have been lately, it does not feel good. You need that optimism to justify being a landlord.
What do you think, we'll end here maybe, but what do you think the outlook looks like for availability of rental properties over the next 3 to 5 years? As this seems to be a big trend of landlords getting rid of investment properties because they are not cash flowing and the upside appreciation over the next few years doesn't look very good. Is that rental supply tightening up significantly in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think the headlines of today are rents have come off a bit. I also think that purpose-built rentals are at an all-time high in terms of construction. So there are some areas and some markets that might be flooded with some rental units in the year or 2 ahead. Mm-hmm. I also feel that purpose-built rentals are at all-time high today, which means that a year or 2 from now or 3 years from now, they'll be probably the pendulum will swing and they'll probably be at a low. So what's the formula that will make sense for a developer 3-5 years from now may not be purpose-built and may be back in the pre-sale game because the rents may not justify purpose-built. And I think in a lot of cases, yes, purpose-built rentals have picked up and they're under construction now, but I think actually today they don't pencil out in terms of you can't build and get financed and make sense of the development to go through. So my guess is today's news will fade, and 3, 5, 7 years from now, rents will be climbing. They'll be talking about affordability issues and a rental crisis again, but there probably are little sub-segments in the city or in Canada in some parts where there's a ton of rentals. You know, I mean, look what sells a preset. Look at what sells a tower. What sells a tower is studios and 1-bedrooms. But once the tower is built, you don't have people demanding all these 300, 400 square foot studios without parking. So what gets a purpose-built rental built today is, well, they're cheap money from government incentives and loans, financing. That may not be available tomorrow. And so what gets these, you know, I think there's always going to be talks about supply and demand. And my guess is in the short term, rental rates are going to be flat. It's not going to be lucrative for an investment, and there's going to be ample options for renters. We're not going to be talking about a shortage. And in the long term, the pendulum's going to go the other way. Immigration's going to tick up, housing starts diminish, and there's going to be a swing the other direction in 5 to 10 years. So, Denny, we will never be at a kumbaya, homeostasis, perfect equilibrium. It's a pendulum that goes one way or the other. And right now, it's going to the favor of tenants and not landlords. And then, I mean, not that it's favoring landlords often. It only really favors landlord when their values of their property goes up. I don't necessarily see a world where it goes back from 3 months notice to 2 or 1. But 2 months notice would help a little bit more predictability. I don't see a world where legislation is going to make it easier to evict tenants. So that's not going to really encourage more supply from people wanting to be landlords. So with those two factors, I think we're probably going to just see a downturn and an uptick. The purpose-built rentals buildings will finish. And once those are done, there's not going to be much more coming on the market because investors aren't going to be building them and more people aren't going to be coming in.
Yeah.
So, Denny, we're in a moment. Market's down. Good time for a tenant. Good time for a tenant to shop around. Tough time to sell a tenant property. And that's why we're having this video, is because if you want to sell that tenant property next year, I think there's some conversations that might be beneficial today.